mental health. This is something you brought up in your presentation, the connection between mental health and spiritual health. I think here of Carl Jung, the 20th century analytical psychologist, and he said, at bottom, every psychological problem is a spiritual problem. Do you agree with that?
I do. I remember the first time I read that many, many years ago in Jung, and I thought, yep, that's right. And Jung, that was born of a lot of clinical experience. That wasn't just off the top of his head. That was dealing with real patients over many, many decades. And, for Jung would put that in his own framework, but I think it's dead right. Because he finally, Brandon, it has to do with our relationship to what Tillich would call ultimate concern, our relationship to the summum bonum, the highest good. The spiritual tradition has long known that the greatest source of human suffering is idolatry, is false worship. When I've ordered my life to something less than God, and that will lead necessarily to suffering. And so it might manifest itself at the psychological level. I'm experiencing anxiety or depression or whatever it is. Well, keep following that all the way to the roots. Now look at someone like Dante. Dante, the Divine Comedy, begins with someone in a psychological crisis. I woke to find myself alone and lost in a dark wood, having wandered from the straight path. And even to think of that time fills me with fear. Well, that's where a lot of people are today, right? Well, what does Dante do under God's guidance ultimately is he goes all the way down to find the source of his alienation and suffering. And what he finds is Satan. Now, what does Satan stand for there? Bad worship. He's the inverse of God, right? He's at the very bottom. He's stuck in the ice, curvatus in se. He's got the three faces, which are kind of a crude imitation of the three persons of the Trinity. So he stands for forms of false worship. And Dante's got to go all the way down. Now there's Jung. At bottom, all of our psychological problems are spiritual problems, right? And so we need psychologists to be sure, but we also need soul doctors. This goes back to the very beginning of my publishing career. One of the very first articles I ever published was priest as mystagogue and priest as soul doctor. Cura animarum, the care of souls. That's what a priest is concerned with. Is there a psychological dimension? Yes, and that's often how the problem will manifest itself. But then who talks about the deepest issues of the soul? And that's where the priest comes in. He's a curate, we used to say, cura animarum. He's a doctor of souls, doctor animarum. So that's all in support of Jung's statement. Yeah, I think at bottom, all psychological problems are spiritual.